Bine v-am regăsit! Printre ocaziile foarte constructive pe care le-am avut la ITU-PP a fost și aceea de a participa la un eveniment conex conferinței plenipotențiare, în care, pentru prima dată, am văzut-o pe fosta președintă a Estoniei explicând pe îndelete modul în care acea țară micuță de la Marea Baltică a ajuns exemplu planetar, aș putea zice, despre ce poate face o națiune atunci când există aliniată și voința politică, și resursele materiale, și aparatul administrativ și, mai important decât orice, și cetățenii acelei țări în digitalizarea serviciilor oferite de un stat. E bine, explicația pe care am auzit-o sau scuza este: Estonia are, dacă are 1 milion de locuitori, ce țară mai este așa mică precum Estonia ca să poată implementa rapid un astfel de program. Dar cred că lecțiile sau mecanismul, algoritmul de la punctul A în punctul B este același și ar putea fi construit în orice stat din lume, inclusiv în România. Vă invit așadar să urmăriți și sub egida Ghid Digital acest interviu absolut deosebit.
Madam President, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, for being here at the first parliamentarian private sector forum we have in Romania. Maybe one day, who knows, Estonia is going to host this event in the margin of another great event, because you have plenty of them there. I'll say a few words about your amazing career, and I'll start at saying that Kersti Kaljulaid is the former president of Estonia between 2016 and 2021. Her Excellency was both the first and only female head of the state in Estonia, as well as the youngest president. She is currently the global advocate for the UN Secretary General for every woman, every child. And very important, during her time in the office, she made her presence felt both in homeland and the international area, by embracing digital technology while developing strong institutions. As leading digital governance country, Estonia digitalized most of its public services for a while. You started in 2000 by equipping every classroom with a computer. You launched in 2002 a high-tech national ID system. In 2014, the area residency represents the latest success in your first part of your road to the fully digital transformation, as I said. So as you made a name in Europe when talking about digital transformation of a nation, and you are among the leaders, which is the very first step when starting such a process? What a nation has to do first?
Thank you all for staying. I understand we are the only thing between your lunch and...
no, we have plenty of time here.
But let's try at least to be entertaining, therefore. First and foremost, digital transformation happens because people want it. At least that is what we have seen in Estonia. And when we started, private sector was offering digital services. I mean, online banking existed, started 1994. So in Estonia, our government was following this and said, okay, people bank online. Why on earth they don't pay taxes online? Kind of logical question, isn't it? And you cannot ask an Estonian to say why the other nations were not asking the same question. I was there, I was advising the Prime Minister from 1999 to 2002, and our advice to the government was run as quickly as you can, because in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, Germans, French, Finns, all big rich nations will overrun you. But if we have a slight head start, we might actually get our e-governance system in place a little bit cheaper, because we offered the sandbox. How we offered the sandbox was, of course, as your minister said, things start from legal space setting. It is the legal space which has to provide for digital services. This is the only way to do it. And what we got right, maybe accidentally, is that we said digital ID is nothing but a passport. Passport in analog world equals passport in digital world. You do not sell your apartment without showing your passport, and you don't buy it without showing your passport in a notary office. So how on earth should you expect to sell or buy something online without similar passport? It is that simple. Legal space setting, technology, frankly speaking, doesn't matter. Somebody will provide it. In Estonia's case, it is the Swedish banks and telcos who provided the technology. Interestingly, for Estonians, not for Swedes and Finns, I don't know why, but for Estonians, they did.
But in this journey, did you encounter any resistance from political leaders, from the society in general?
Well, if you think back when we didn't have digital services yet, but the mobile phones came and then Amazon started, did you encounter any resistance from citizens to use Amazon? You didn't. Then why on earth should you encounter resistance from citizens to use online ability to sell or buy a car without going to the office? Why on earth? Tell me. I mean, I cannot understand why there should be resistance in the opportunity not to go to the school to register your child, but to apply online for a place in the school. Any more than you have resistance to banking online instead of wasting time in the bank office. I mean, where's the difference? Tell me. I mean, Estonians at least have never seen a difference.
What about public institutions or politicians as the same?
Well, politicians needed to get the public service delivered. And as I said, we didn't think that we will sit 20 years later and explain why only Estonia to this state is totally digitally transformed. We absolutely expected each and every government to do the same in coming years, because each and every private company was doing it. And we in Estonia do not understand that public sector has to be somewhat less developed than is private sector. So politicians, of course, realized the reality. Technology is there, everybody's going to use. Do we want Estonians to, be part of it? Yes, we want Estonians to be part of it. Civil servants, of course, were a different story, because 60% of people who worked in tax office lost their jobs. But luckily, in Estonia, unemployment has always been very low because we have extremely liberal labor market. And private sector, of course, always picks up the people who are skilled and talented, which were people in our tax board. So indeed, there will be efficiency gain in public sector, and it does mean job loss. But we are losing the jobs which are not the most interesting. And these people all have the chance to go and do something more interesting, like tax advice, for example, instead of, simply tax gathering. Isn't it so? In all technologies, jobs which are not worth doing if you have a human brain are those who get automatized. Those jobs which mean we are compassionate human beings to each other, they remain. This is our competitive advantage in 21st century over AI, over all machines. We can specialize on being compassionate human beings, and this is worth doing.
That's a strong message for countries. It's indeed a very, very transparent answer to which is the impact of technology on the countries, on the society, on the public servant as well. It's not something that it's always on the table in the discussion we politicians have with the civil society. But in countries as yours, where the digital transformation process is somehow almost done, we are talking more and more about innovation. How do you think we can embrace and integrate innovation in public services? Because this is another story. This is a topic about the future, about how the public services are going to look like in the future.
Well, once you have explained to your citizens that government has absolutely no excuse to offer less than private sector does, people start to promote themselves the development of the systems. Like, let's say about 15 years ago, private sector companies started to prompt people, your contract is ending. There is the new mobile phone is available. Immediately, Estonian people asked, why is government not telling me that my driver's license is expiring? So the government had the obligation to kind of start providing similar services because people see private sector is doing, we want it too. Of course, it is not always simple because you have the legal space which constantly needs to extend and expand. We tend to take position that if it's not forbidden expressis verbis, then it is possible. For example, can you let delivery robots out on the streets alone in Estonia? Well, we say it's not forbidden. Obviously, you can, therefore. So we created a test bed where delivery robots in the Tallinn city environment, our capital, the most densely populated part of Estonia, walk around. Immediately, all those who are dealing in this kind of equipment provision had many interesting questions and at the same time answers from the society. For example, do you need to somehow regulate who has priority, let's say on pedestrian crossings? Well, we adapted our traffic code. It says now people, cars, bicycles all have priority over delivery robot. Guess what happens if you now implement this? I mean, delivery robots, they're cute. They look like little dogs or something. I mean, actually they don't, but people kind of let their animistic instinct run wild. So they want to help them, they want to let them pass, and so on, so on. So we had to train people that, I mean, these are machines. They're not beings, so they don't have priority. And now imagine, look into the future. We have this kind of AI systems helping, let's say, elderly people in their homes. If all these systems did not apply all the same standards, how on earth will we manage? So this kind of testbed experiences keep promoting kind of this uptake of new technologies, informing Parliament on how to adjust legal space and going forward. Are they always up to date? No, they aren't. But I mean, we are doing the best we can because we are democracy. There is a kind of plethora of opinion and it may take time. But we have found an additional way to put kind of ourselves under pressure. There is such a thing like Accelerator Estonia. Accelerator Estonia is Estonian government investment body which invests globally into the ideas which people present in competitions to this body. Which means government puts its own money into a new digital idea. And now, if this idea needs changes in legislative space to thrive in our sandbox, then obviously government has a skin in the game. So they have to adjust. This is the plan, how we plan to be always a little bit ahead of the curve. Will we succeed? Let's see in 10 years' time. I don't know. But right now, for example, we have taken the position that since our traffic code does not say that the car has to have a driver inside to be driven, it is possible to imagine that you have a set of drivers who sit somewhere in the office and drive cars back home or to the loading station remotely, for example.
Some would say that Estonia is a small country and it's easier to go through a digital transformation process.
Do you know what is Trambita? Trambita is the Ukrainian e-government system. Ukraine is a nation of 40 million people currently suffering the aggression of Russia. Trambita, in the first 2 months of this aggression, registered 5,000 new companies within Ukrainian jurisdiction who are able to pay taxes. Ukrainian government services still run for their citizens who are not even in Ukraine, like e-school for Ukrainian children. The public registries which allow to establish who is related to who, even if all the buildings in Mariupol are destroyed, in principle property rights can be verified by digital systems. Ukrainian model has been also supported by Estonian experience, and it's very similar in architecture. And it serves 40 million people in big distress today. So no one in no big country has this excuse, I'm sorry to say. It doesn't exist. In addition, Trambita has made it possible for Ukrainian society and government to have additional resilience stemming from new technologies. Of course, thanks also to the help of the private sector and Elon Musk and Starlink, I mean, making sure they do have internet connections still available. But those people outside Ukraine as well are benefiting. So this case study demonstrates to us that actually size doesn't matter. You can be big, but you can be digital. Thank you. I take this as an applause to the Ukrainian nation, which really is fighting for all of us, the freedom-loving nations. Thank you.
It seems that the room strongly approves both your statements and that there are no excuses for the countries, large countries, in not achieving their digital goals. But how do we ensure that we are reaching any corner of the country? How are we doing that?
It is expensive and it takes time and it takes private and public sector cooperation. In our case, banks offered their online services for free for retired people. If you accessed e-banking, used Estonian digital ID and were a retired person, you didn't pay a penny for banking services, a carrot thing. Second, we did something which was called Tiger Leap. Tiger is an exotic animal, doesn't exist in Estonia, hence it was a proper name for training our people to use computers. I'm talking about the beginning of the century, which means computers were not at home. They were in schools, in libraries, places like that. We deemed internet is a human right. And then we ran voluntary training programs, which were something similar, like there stands an old woman in bus stop. A volunteer comes out from the library because, of course, bus stop in rural area is in front of library and asks, grandmother, why are you going to town? Grandmother says, I'm going to social services office to apply for some support scheme because I need it. The voluntary person says, grandmother, do come into the library. It's raining or snowing. It's nasty outside. Let's resolve your problem. And if it is resolved before the bus comes, next time you know you don't need to take that bus. I mean, it sounds poetic, but this was precisely what we did. We trained, we spent resources and effort, and not only government resources, because, you know, the private companies understood that there is huge cost efficiency for them in Estonian economy if they can also help government to onboard everybody inclusively onto the digital platform. But the lesson is, it is the society, the government, the parliament who have to lead, because indeed most technology is created as it should be created by the private sector. But societal change is the responsibility of the politicians. No shying away from that. Government, parliament, they have to take the responsibility.
How long does it take to grow a digital nation with people that already embrace the technology and are using the technology every day?
Less than 10 years. The first public service went online before digital ID. It used the banking gateway. It was the tax board 1997. Because, I mean, is there anybody in the room who loves queuing at the tax office and talking to the taxman? No, I don't see any hands going up. Well, if you are living in Estonia and you want to see the taxman, I mean, there is a place where you can do it, but most of us don't want to. So we were extremely relieved we'd never have to see a taxman. And similarly, if you tell people that, I mean, you don't have to queue so that your neighbors see that you need social support from government, people do it online. If you tell young mothers that you don't have to take your baby and go to the city government to register the birth of a baby, it happens automatically in the hospital. I mean, people do embrace these services. Yes, you have to make also sure that they know their data is protected. But frankly speaking, now again, imagine this. Yesterday evening, in your doctor's office, there is your file. You think it is safe in some cupboard. But in fact, are you 100% sure nobody was reading your medical file yesterday evening? Are you? You aren't, without forensic evidence. But in a digital database, if somebody reads my medical file, there is an individual, personal fingerprint of a doctor or a nurse. And if I think they had no reason to check my medical file, I complain and the state sues. It actually may take grotesque form. For example, we had a situation in Estonia where one doctor fell gravely ill and his colleagues wanted to help him, and everybody was looking at the data, totally forgetting that they are not the treating doctor, so they have no right to. Luckily, their colleague recovered, and the colleague said, I mean, I don't want these people to be punished. But the state said, no, they had no right to check your data. I mean, punishment was not severe, obviously, because of special cases. But in fact, no, in Estonian system, it's not free to check your ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend's tax data. It's punishable. And we all know it. It's similarly, we all know it, like, you know, on the street space, like how you need to behave. It takes a few court cases, sure, when you start. But it does happen. So you create the possibility, you offer carrots to people, and not wasting your time is a carrot, and then you make sure that data is protected. That's the recipe, and I believe that by 2004, so in 7 years' time, we were more or less there, and citizens were complaining that the services are not interlinked, so the government had the opportunity to ask several times for the same data. And then we went back to Parliament and said, we need the once only principle, which means that if government knows, then you cannot ask twice, as the minister already eloquently explained this morning to us.
I stay a bit more with the education and digital skills, because in the statements I've heard here at the Plenipotentiary Conference last week, 10 of them were related to the digital skills of the people. How do you think we should educate the younger generations? Because we are talking more and more about digital natives. Do we have to invest more in their tech education, or should we invest in teaching them traditional subjects, encouraging them to be active members of the society? What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, that's kind of counterintuitive thing, because, you know, whatever we try to teach our children, it is Stone Age when they enter the job market. But this is not the problem, because, you know, we learn people skills by, interacting with other people. And when I went to school, nobody trained us in body language or getting ice cream bought without unnecessarily angering other people in the shop or the shop lady. We learned it by low level, low risk, permanent interactions with each other. Now our children have this same kind, low risk, sometimes also high risk, unfortunately, interactions with technology as they grow up and as technology is changing. So forget about training children in digital skills any more than you teach children to read or write. You need to give them access, and you need to give them adequate training. This is simple. What is more complicated is now that because our children do not acquire naturally people skills, emotional intelligence, reading other people's body language, then learning to be a human being in a human society, this same compassionate human being, this is the skill we need to train since kindergarten, and need to continue with this in all education system. And in a way, this is relief, because this we know what it is, and it functions similarly on each technology level. Technology levels we cannot imagine. They still need to be compassionate human beings, able to survive and able to support each other's dreams. And this is the paradox in the whole thing. Technology, they catch themselves how to be like we want them to be. This we need to teach them now.
But do you think that technology can help us in achieving this, in helping them to have more developed social skills?
Social skills, no, but I do think that the schools will change from where teacher teaches to supported learning. Because, if I went to school, the knowledge of a 10-year-old was more or less function of their age. Nowadays, it's much more function of their interests and their age. And hence you have a classroom full of children studying English, for example. I asked my son when he was 8, but how many children in your class actually, require teaching at the level what is expected in the 2nd grade? And he said, 1. And then I asked, how are the others doing? He said, well, everybody speaks English. Nobody can write. But I don't want to learn writing by the sentences, I have a dog, do you have a dog? Because I want to know how to write leprechaun. And then some children don't know that some words are rude. See, teacher cannot teach this class. They can give children exercises. And of course, you should have electronic things to help children to move from the one level to next level, get feedback, and this has to be supported by the teacher. Something similar to the French school of École 42, if you know what this is. This is the coding school, level to level, and feedback, automatic feedback. This is the future of education. But as you notice, even more machines in the thing. So obviously we need to redesign what we teach about being a human being. And no, you cannot use technology to teach somebody to be a human being. This is our competitive advantage. This is exactly what I'm saying. Machines don't take that away from us. We will always have better cognitive capabilities. I know some AI specialists might disagree, But I mean, when we really get to singularity, let's then compete. Right now, we don't have to compete in this sphere. We are far ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned the once only principle that was somehow the invention of Estonia at the beginning, and after that implemented in some other countries in Europe. And I have to say that I was inspired in a lot of the work that I had in the parliament by your principle. Do you think that the Estonian ID you have in place right now, it's ahead of EIDAS 2.0 regulation of what Europe is proposing? Because when you implemented once only principle, you were ahead Europe.
Yeah, first I have to say that Estonians did not invent once only principles. Estonians did not invent Kieli's signature architecture, which is the basis of our X-road and our e-governments. It's similar to blockchain, but uses less energy, which today is very important. Estonians did not invent services online. Nothing of this. Estonia was a relatively poor country, lower end of the middle income when we started to digitize. So the only thing which we invented was creating permissive legal space for technology update. So nothing else we invented. Now, yes, we invent a lot of digital stuff. We have 10 unicorns. So, I mean, it changes gradually. But initially, and if you still look, Estonian part of ICT in Estonian economy is as big as agriculture. But it is not as big as, for example, in case of Israel, who already long time has been technology developer. Estonia is only morphing into a technology developer right now, but it wasn't. But our digital ID thing and EIDAS, well, we were worried at one point that maybe one day European Union will adopt a standard which will put us into this kind of catch-22 situation where you either use your own polyfunctional ID or the common EU ID. Luckily, because we are also the member of the European Union, and also during their own presidencies, other countries do normally consult Estonia about how to go. This is not the case. I mean, Estonian IDs, and it's not only chip ID, there's mobile ID, smart ID, they are EIDAS compatible. As are, by the way, most European digital IDs, because EIDAS is designed in a way to accommodate, I mean, the variability at the same time, but allowing interconnectivity.
You said that the thing you did and you put first in place was a strong legal framework that enabled technology to be adopted and to be developed in the companies and private sector as well. How do you find the balance between offering transparency in the way you are using the data, having a transparent administration, implementing seamless public services, and avoiding overregulation?
Actually, when you go digital, you should streamline your processes while going digital, because if you digitize, I mean, cumbersome bureaucracy, you will just have more efficient cumbersome bureaucracy. So definitely processes need to be streamlined while you are changing them. So don't miss that opportunity. It may be difficult to imagine, but once you start, I mean, going through this process, it kind of happens by itself. Which of course doesn't mean that occasionally our parliament doesn't add some layer of red tape, which really is cumbersome. But you know, it also has been the case. I even remember one discussion of the last weeks in Estonia, where government dreamt up something which was cumbersome and difficult to implement in digital terms. And also, if you look at it, it doesn't make that much sense to have this kind of variables in the system of offering public service anyway. So when the digital experts said this is impossible to do, then government said, okay, then we need to reconsider, and probably we end up with a much smoother system. So it has kind of a feedback loop, of course, which also to a certain extent controls, I mean, the wild wishes of politicians, if you wish.
What does e-governance mean? It's a mindset, it's a tool, it's a community.
Don't over-mystify things. It's a passport online, nothing else. I mean, it's an opportunity for government and for private companies to apply safe, secure, encrypted, time-stamped kind of signing opportunities, exchanging data, checking data, making sure that it is safe. But it is nothing else. Many people think this e-governance is kind of a some kind of thing which surrounds every Estonian, but it isn't. It's just I mean, instead of signing on paper and going somewhere to sign, you just do it online, and it also has timestamp beside it. And of course, I mean, if you're inside the system, it's all encrypted. So if you sign, let's say you buy something from an Estonian company and you pay also by direct billing through your bank, then this Google doesn't send you endlessly advertisements for the same stuff. And this is how Estonians, by the way, learn that there is safe internet and there is unsafe internet. Because I mean, if you are inside our ecosystem, then you don't get additional advertisement. If you're outside of our ecosystem, you use Booking, then Booking tries to send you back to Tokyo for a year after you once went. So you know, this way you kind of rise kind of understanding of what does it mean, safety, data protection, by just simple examples to your people.
You said about safe internet, and we all know that it was a moment in your history when you were under a strong cyber attack. And the infrastructure, a big part of your infrastructure crashed. Are you prepared now?
Yeah, it was 2007. We were attacked by cyber means. We were the only government who could be attacked at that time. The services inside the country more or less held, but you couldn't access them from abroad. I was myself in Luxembourg, and I didn't have access. But for others, it was better, quicker restored. The type of attack we had then, I'm sure that while we are talking, half of the bodies you represent are under similar kind of attacks today, because this is, I mean, how the world is. Attacks are raining on all digital ecosystems. Somebody's all the time knocking at your door. And you have to understand that this is the case. So you have to be designing your system so that it is not one big system, which is safer anyway, because if it's compartmentalized, also stealing data, sneaking at data is more difficult than when it is in the one system. It has to be kind of in several copies. It has to have several ways of access. I mean, all this applies very similarly to all technology systems. I mean, like in electricity grid, you have to have varied connections so that if one is down, the others will sustain the grid. It's the same actually for digital services. So just the fact that there are malign actors who try to take it away from us all the time doesn't deter us from using it, because we know that we have to always adequately protect. We've had once in the history the situation where we were warned by academia that there is the risk that our digital ID could be cracked for less than $50,000, one ID. And we immediately reacted and patched the system over. And then we also, by the way, it was 2016, I believe, we realized we are now totally digitally transformed. You know how? Because not everybody, but some people had to go to police and border guard office to get physically a new digital ID. And you know what was the most common complaint? I had to queue for an hour in a public office. I mean, no Estonian is used to queuing in public office for an hour. I mean, imagine now how often if you go and sell your car, buy your car, or renew your license, you do queue in these offices. I've lived abroad, I know.
I was about to say that in some areas of the globe, people are not used to queue for an hour. They are used to queue for 3 hours. Do you think, related to the cyber, that we should think about having an European, maybe army for cyber defense?
Each and every government in Europe today has an agency which is responsible for making sure that the services it is offering are defended and protected all the time. None of them is ready to explain to us in detail how they operate or cooperate, neither on civil side nor on the military side, but trust me, they exist, they operate, and they cooperate. And this is how it needs to be. I mean, it's very similar to what you do in defending the rest of your infrastructure. And repairing digital infrastructure, I believe, is easier than just, I mean, ruin the physical infrastructure, as we are seeing now in the Baltic Sea, for example.
You are seeing many times that your strongest partner was industry while transforming and digitalizing Estonia. Which is the secret for this? Because it's not working in most of the countries. I mean, what made you trust each other in such a way that you partnership and you transformed your country?
Well, first, industry had their own interest. Banks and telecoms, they didn't want to open offices in a not densely populated country. I mean, Estonia is as big as Netherlands, but we have 1 million people. Netherlands is about 20 million, I guess, 19, I think. So you see, I mean, there is no revenue in bank office building in Estonia, and so they didn't want to do it, and they wanted to save money. That's why. But that's why we also used companies who were interested in Estonia and the Estonian market. Because if you start, for example, let's imagine you want to do a digital government system and you go to some of these multinational IT service providers. I wouldn't name any of them because maybe some of them will be ready to go tailor-made, I don't know. But mostly, if you use the mainstream product, then they say to you, this is my product, adapt your needs. E-government system cannot be built this way. It has kind of legal background, it has language background, it has to work based on local support teams because you cannot rely on outside support on such things. So it always, if you start down this route, causes also the development of ICT sector in the country. And you know, cooperating with our companies, there are many governments who are doing this nowadays, is in this sense also useful that Estonia, being a tiny country, lacks workforce. So our companies bring the concept, but develop by partnership local ICT sector to take over once it is in place. Because simply, I mean, we don't have the workforce to help each and every government globally to run their e-government. We are 1 million, I am sorry. We try to get people on the right track, but then we bow out and we leave it to the local ICT developers.
The last question. If you would start Estonia e-governance system again from scratch, which are the lessons learned? What would you do differently, in a different way?
We need to do things differently because when we started our system, then the most dangerous thing online was a virus. And you downloaded Kaspersky and it was not a problem. So you'd need from the day one to invest much more into defending the whole ecosystem. You cannot kind of gradually grow up as we did together with the internet. But I would also keep in mind that doing it is worth doing it because we say we believe about 5 working days per capita a year of our people's time. And we have 1 century on this planet, each and everybody, not the time we want to spend queuing in the government offices. Second, we also know that by providing for safe internet tools, people will learn that there are unsafe internet tools simply by having the comparison. And third, it will have positive side effects if you manage to do it inclusively. This is very important. We found out, for example, when COVID hit, that our grandmothers are perfectly internet compatible because most of them were in their 50s when we started digitization. And I mean, my mother has a Facebook account and communicates with friends over Facebook. So she wasn't, I mean, so much in trouble during the COVID time about being alone. So having an e-government system actually has positive side effect for the society, making, I mean, people more encouraged to use digital services offered also by the private sector. Even more the reason for the private sector to actually buy into development, because very often we see private sector reluctant to invest into something together with governments. All private sector people here, no pain, no gain. You have to invest together with the government because you will share also the cost savings and the benefits of the whole system. So go it together.
President Kersti Kaljulaid.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.